welcome to another lesson. This time we're going to take a look at the tune Nardis. So let's just get right into it. First, I would suggest that you try to play the tune using arpeggios. So just 4-note arpeggios on each chord, right? So E minor, F major 7. Then there is a E major 7 in the same bar, which you could ignore, but for now let's do it. Just try to play the changes as they're written in the real book. So E minor, F major, E major 7, B 7, C major 7. Sorry. All right, so let's see what that sounds like. Chord tones over the changes. A section again. Descending, just to mix it up. Maybe add some rhythm. Okay, before I talk a little bit about that, let's also look at the more the other way you can play chord tones. I've covered this in the previous lesson, which is kind of the John Coltrane digital pattern. Let's call it Coltrane patterns, in lack of a better word. So instead of just playing the chord tones 1, 3, 5, 7, we're playing 1, 2, 3, 5 for the F, for example. And the E minor is 1, 3, 4, 5. So for major chords, 1, 2, 3, 5, also dominant chord, right? And then for the minor chords, we're playing 1, 3, 4, 5. Somebody asked me why I think of the second note as a ninth, but I like to think of them as extensions, because if I see a B7 flat 9, I know I'm going to play a flat 9 in the, as opposed to a regular 9. So that's how I think about it. But anyway, this is what it sounds like if I play the Coltrane type chord tones, which I've covered again in a previous lesson, I think on Blues for Alice, if you want to look that up. Okay, so there's obviously a lot more you can do with that. You can play inversions and all sorts of stuff. So I'm just kind of going over some ideas of what you can do. Oh, by the way, I got a new guitar. In case you haven't noticed, it's a Guild. I'm pretty stoked. It's very slim. That's why I guess it's called a T50 Slim. So yeah, I guess you're gonna be hearing me play this a lot in the future. Another thing, some housekeeping. I have had some people ask me about Skype lessons, and I'm trying to set up so I can do Skype lessons here, but I don't feel that I have quite the equipment yet. So in the summer, like, I'll let you know. Also, I have a Patreon account, and if anybody is interested in that, all the money, I'm just gonna do that Patreon account attached to my guitar lessons, these lessons, the jazz guitar lessons or whatever, and nothing else. So also, if I'm making any money off of that, I'm gonna use that to buy stuff that goes toward improving my channel. So editing software and kind of expensive stuff, right? And better computer and recording microphones, I don't know. So that's what that is. Okay, so now let's move on to scales. Obviously there are options. You can look at these chords in different ways, but I'm gonna consider, like, I'm gonna think of the tune as if it's in E minor, so 1 sharp, right? And so the first chord is an E minor, then it would be an Aeolian or a natural minor scale. Then we have an F major 7, which I guess would be called a flat 2 major 7. The closest, I want to get the closest scale that works over that chord, but closest to the original key of E minor, so that would be F Lydian, right? There are other ways you can look at this, but that's how I'm gonna do for now. So then we have an E major 7 in the same bar. That would be E major, just an E major scale. And then we have B7, which would be B Phrygian dominant, or E harmonic minor starting on B, to C Lydian. Right, the C Lydian is the closest scale to E minor. Well, it is the same scale actually. And then A minor would be Dorian. And then we have the F again. Then we have E major for a short while. And E minor. So let's just see what that sounds like. So I'm gonna change my mind for the B section where it goes to A minor, F, A minor, F. Sounds like it's transposed to A natural minor there, or C major. So I'm gonna play the F instead of the F sharp there and see what that sounds like. Okay. So here, natural minor A. I think that sounds better actually. Okay, so you notice that E major 7 that happens in the beginning. So E minor. It's nice, but it can be a little bit too much. I think if you, especially if you're comping and you play it, you should not play it when you're comping, because it, as the improviser, you want the option of playing that chord or ignoring it, right? So if the whoever is comping is constantly playing that chord there, that might interfere with what you're doing, right? So it's better to leave it out, I think. Okay, another thing is what you can do, in my opinion, is that you can kind of look at this tune as more of a modal thing, right? Where you're playing the Phrygian mode. And also, again, check out my previous lesson on Phrygian. So the tune kind of suggests Phrygian, right? Because you have this E minor, F, which would be E Phrygian. And so I can look at those bars as a modal kind of thing, like more of a key center. So a lot of times when you want to kind of play a tune like this, but you want it to be more modal sounding, is what you're pedaling and stuff, and you're kind of thinking of groups of chords as a mode, right? So this is, and then you have the B7, and then A minor, and here again it says E major 7 there, but you could treat that, you can think of that as some kind of E Phrygian. Just ignore that it says E major 7 in the real book, and think of it as more of a Phrygian sound. So I'm going to play over those chords. I'm going to play E Phrygian. And that's not what they're doing when you're listening to like the original recordings and stuff. They treat that more as an E minor, but I definitely hear a lot of people do that. So I'll try to do this. We'll see what it sounds like. So E Phrygian, and then B7. Here we go. Right? So also the melody, right, suggests that there's an F natural in the melody. So to get an even more exotic sound, you could play the Phrygian with a major third, or Phrygian dominant, or whatever it's called. Again, check out my lesson on Phrygian if you want to know more about that. So then we get this scale, right? Okay, which is A harmonic minor starting on E, or E Phrygian dominant. Interestingly enough, if I start out playing that scale, then I just play a B Phrygian dominant here. And here I'm back to. So even though I'm playing in this loop I made with my loop pedal, I'm playing E major 7s and stuff like that. It's still gonna sound pretty good, I think. We'll see what you think. So I'll play Phrygian dominant and B Phrygian dominant. There are other Phrygian scales you could experiment with as well. Now, the interesting thing to note is that the B7 chord leads to C major instead of what you normally would expect it to go to E minor, right? But you can experiment with different scales on that chord as well. And what's interesting to notice, let's say you play the Phrygian dominant scale, and then you go to C major. Well, it's shown just one note different, which is the D sharp, right? So instead of thinking of a B dominant scale going to a C Lydian, you can just think of it's the same scale except one note is different. I think that's easier. And if you want to be more experimental and adventurous, you could play more unusual dominant scales over that B7, because again in the song there's a G sharp. He's kind of hinting to that. And that note is very outside, obviously. You could argue, well, it's just a chromatic note, right? But that note is interesting. So if I, for example, play a symmetrical diminished or a half whole scale over the B7, I get that G sharp, which I think is a very interesting sound. So I'll show you what that sounds like. So I'm going to do the same thing as before, but when I arrive at the B7, I'm going to think of that as a symmetrical diminished kind of sound. Might even stay on it over the C as well, just because you can.